I built the business, she cheated my lawyer, made sure she left with nothing. I still remember the night my life quietly fell apart, not with drama or shouting, but with this cold, empty click in my chest, like a light going off. It was almost midnight. I was sitting in my office at the back of our small warehouse, my laptop glowing, spreadsheets open, invoices waiting, and a half-cold cup of coffee staring at me like it was judging my life choices. I had just closed a deal that was huge for my new business, the kind of deal that meant maybe we could finally breathe. Maybe take that vacation my wife kept talking about. Maybe upgrade the old car that sounded like it was coughing every time I turned the key. My phone buzzed. It was a message from my buddy Mark. Nothing unusual. He sent memes, sports stuff, random messages that made me roll my eyes and laugh. But this time it was just one sentence and a blurry photo. It said, "Man, you need to see this." And under it, there was a picture taken at a restaurant downtown, my wife, sitting across from some guy I did not know, their heads close, her smile a little too soft, his hand on hers. When I first saw it, my brain tried to protect me. I told myself it was nothing, a work meeting, a weird angle, bad timing. I actually zoomed in like some detective, hoping to find something innocent, maybe a stack of papers, maybe other people at the table, anything that would let me say, "See, you were just tired, go home, sleep." But there were just 2 wine glasses, a candle, her favorite dress, and a look on her face that I had not seen directed at me in a long time. I sat there with my jaw clenched, the warehouse silent around me, forklift parked, lights dim, the hum of the vending machine sounding way too loud. I stared at that picture so long my eyes started to burn. I was not the dramatic type. I did not throw things. I did not punch walls. I did what I always did. I breathed, counted slowly, and started thinking. Because that is what I am good at, thinking through problems, breaking them down. I built this business from 3 credit cards and a beat-up laptop. I know how to survive chaos. So I told myself the same thing I tell my employees when things go wrong. First get the facts, then decide what to feel. I called Mark, my voice a lot calmer than I felt. Asked him where he was. He said he was still near that restaurant. He had gone there with coworkers and had been shocked when he saw my wife walk in with this guy. He said he took the picture, stepped outside, and sent it to me because he would rather risk me being mad than pretend he saw nothing. And in that moment I realized 2 things. 1, I had at least one real friend. And 2, my marriage might already be over. I thanked him, told him to go home, told him not to make a scene. If she asked, he had not seen her. Then I grabbed my keys, turned off the office lights, and walked out into the dark parking lot. The air was cold, the kind of cold that wakes you up whether you want it or not. As I unlocked my car, my hands were steady, which honestly scared me more than if they had been shaking, because that meant something in me had already accepted what my eyes had seen. I sat in the car for a minute, phone face down on the passenger seat, and said out loud, "Okay, if this is what it looks like, then this is the night everything changes, and I am not going to be the one who breaks. I am the one who built this life, and I am not letting anyone walk off with it like it is a free sample in a store." When I pulled into our driveway, the house looked completely normal, porch light on, curtains drawn, the kind of picture-perfect quiet that makes neighbors think everything in your life is fine. I sat there for a moment with the engine ticking as it cooled, running through 100 possible conversations in my head, none of them sounding like something real adults would say. My wife's car was already parked, meaning she had beaten me home somehow, which was its own kind of answer. I walked inside and heard her humming softly in the kitchen, like she had just come from a relaxing evening with a friend, not whatever that dinner really was. She looked up and smiled when she saw me, and it hit me how practiced that smile was, like she had worn it so long she forgot it used to be genuine. "Hey, you're home late," she said. Grabbing a glass of water like this was just another night. I set my keys down and studied her. The way her hair was curled a bit more than usual, the faint smell of perfume she only wore for special occasions. The same perfume I bought her for our anniversary last year. She asked how work went, and I almost laughed at the normalcy of it. But instead I asked where she had been. Her eyes flickered just a second, barely noticeable unless you have spent years memorizing someone's face. She said she went out with a friend, girl from work, nothing special, just dinner. And here is the thing. If I had not already seen the picture, I might have believed her, not because it sounded convincing, but because I wanted to believe it. I wanted us to still be us. I pulled my phone from my pocket, set it face down on the counter, and said her name quietly. The way you say someone's name when you are giving them one last chance to choose honesty. She froze, hand on the cabinet door, not turning around. And in that stillness, I felt something inside me shift, like a door closing, not with anger, not with heartbreak, but with clarity. She finally turned toward me and asked why I was looking at her like that. I told her calmly that I knew she had not been with a coworker, and that I had a photo from someone who saw her. She went pale, then red, then defensive in record time. Like lightning running through emotions, she said I had no right to spy on her, which was interesting considering I had not spied. She had just been reckless. I told her I wanted to hear the truth from her, just once, and she launched into this speech about feeling lonely, how I never paid enough attention to her, how I was always working, always tired, always distracted. I stood there listening, hands resting on the counter, and a strange calm washed over me, because suddenly it all made sense. All the little comments, the cold shoulders, the sudden excuses. She had been building this justification for months, maybe longer. She had convinced herself that my hard work for our future was somehow neglect. She said she did not want it to happen, but things just did, which is something people say when they want forgiveness without admitting they had a choice. I told her I worked like I did because I wanted us to have a good life. I wanted us to be secure, to build something together. She shot back that she never asked for that, which was funny considering how often she complained we did not have enough. I felt this odd detachment rise in me, like I was watching the scene instead of living it. And with that distance came a decision. I was done fighting for someone who had already left the ring. I told her we would talk later when emotions cooled, which was partially true, but mostly I needed space to think strategically, because when you build a business from scratch, you learn that emotion is the thing that takes you out. Planning is the thing that saves you. She stormed off to the bedroom, muttering something about how I never understood her, and I just stood there in the kitchen, staring at the glass of water she had placed on the counter, the air still carrying the perfume that now felt like a stranger's scent, and I said to myself quietly, "All right, if this is the road we are on, then I will walk it with my head high. No panic, no rage, no begging, because I learned a long time ago that when something is already broken, pretending it is whole only cuts your hands, and I was done bleeding for someone who had never bothered to notice the cost of my effort. The next morning the house felt like a hotel lobby after everyone checked out, quiet, cold, too neat in all the wrong ways. My wife moved around like she was trying to act normal, humming again, making coffee, tapping her phone like she was waiting for someone to text her first. I watched her from the hallway for a moment, noticing how she could switch moods like flipping a light. The night before might as well have been a dream for her, but for me it was the moment the switch inside flipped from hurt to strategy. I left for the office early, told her I had a meeting. She nodded without looking up, which honestly saved me from having to pretend I cared about pretending. The moment I got into my car, I called my lawyer, a calm man with a voice that could soothe a tornado. I explained the situation in simple terms, no theatrics, just facts. He listened, and then said the sentence that changed everything. "If she wants to take from you, we will make sure she walks away empty-handed." Those words were not revenge, they were reassurance, like a seatbelt clicking in place. I drove to the warehouse with this growing sense of control, something I had not felt in a long time, maybe ever. At work I threw myself into tasks, not because I needed distraction, but because building things reminded me who I actually was. My employees joked around me. Music played, forklifts beeped, and for the first time in months I felt grounded. During lunch I went over documents my lawyer sent. Everything clean, professional, airtight. I realized how differently people think when they have something to lose. My wife had not planned anything. She had just acted on emotion and assumed she could spin a story later. I, on the other hand, had been creating systems and handling risks for years. I knew how to prepare for storms. At home that evening she tried a new tactic. She acted wounded, quiet, fragile, her voice soft like she wanted sympathy. She said she felt judged, misunderstood, pressured. She talked about her feelings in long, vague sentences that somehow made her actions the fault of gravity and time, not her choices. I listened, not interrupting, not nodding, not feeding the performance. She eventually asked why I was so calm, and I told her because clarity is peaceful. She blinked like I had spoken in another language. I could see in her eyes the moment she realized I was not fighting for the relationship anymore, and that scared her far more than anger ever could. She asked if we could try therapy, start fresh, work on things, and maybe months ago I would have said yes in a heartbeat. But now all I heard was someone trying to save the comfort they lived in, not the marriage itself. I told her we could talk about logistics, but emotionally the bridge was already burned, not because I wanted it that way, but because she had crossed a line she could not uncross just by crying softly in the living room. That night I slept in the guest room, not out of spite, but because peace is a choice, and I had made mine. I lay there staring at the ceiling, feeling oddly light, like someone had taken a weight off my chest I did not realize I had been carrying for years. The truth is the moment you stop begging for what you deserve, you start remembering what you are capable of, and I knew that whatever was coming next, I was not walking into it broken, I was walking into it prepared, and that made all the difference. A few days later we were sitting across from each other at the dining table. The same table where we used to plan vacations and argue about which takeout place was overrated. Now it felt like a negotiation room in a crime documentary. Except no one here was dangerous, just disappointed. She had finally realized I was serious, that this was not a mood or a phase, or something she could fix with a soft apology and a promise to communicate better. My lawyer had advised me to keep everything calm and documented. So that is exactly what I did. She started by saying she deserved half of everything because she supported me emotionally while I built the business, which was an interesting take considering most nights she went to bed early complaining I worked too long. She claimed she had sacrificed so much, and I had to stop myself from asking for a list of those sacrifices because I knew sarcasm would not help me here. I kept my voice steady and explained that legally. The business was structured in a way that protected it, meaning she could not touch it. She blinked fast like her brain was buffering. Then she tried another angle. She said she needed the house, the car, maybe some financial support to get back on her feet. I reminded her she worked full-time and had savings. She said those savings were not enough. I said that was not my responsibility anymore. She stared at me like she was waiting for the old version of me to appear, the one who would cave, apologize for things I had not done, rush to fix her hurt feelings. But he was gone, replaced by someone who finally understood the value of boundaries. When she realized her emotional arguments were not working, she tried guilt, saying she cheated because I pushed her away by working so much. I looked her in the eyes and said calmly that responsibility is not a game of musical chairs. You do not get to hand your mistakes to someone else because it feels lighter. She opened her mouth to argue, but nothing came out. She knew I was right, and she hated that. The air between us got tense, not loud tense, but tight tense, like a rubber band stretched too far. She finally asked why I was being so cold, and I told her I was not cold. I was clear. Clarity feels like coldness to people who rely on confusion to get their way. She flinched like the truth had slapped her. I almost felt bad. Almost. But then I remembered the picture, the lies, the excuses, the way she tried to make me feel guilty for building a better life for us. And the sympathy faded, replaced by this steady, unwavering resolve. When the conversation ended, she walked away frustrated, probably expecting me to chase after her. But I just stayed seated, hands folded, breathing slow and steady. That was the moment I realized emotional distance is not cruelty. It is just refusing to set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like someone had finally stepped in to protect me, and that someone was me. The official divorce process began like most paperwork disasters do, with long emails, many signatures, and enough legal language to make anyone question whether English was still their first language. My lawyer guided me through everything step by step, calm, steady, precise. The man could probably defuse a bomb using nothing but a cup of tea and a spreadsheet. Meanwhile, my soon-to-be ex-wife tried every possible strategy to tilt the situation in her favor. First, she played the emotional angle, sending long messages about memories and how we once dreamed of forever. I read them politely, but feelings do not erase facts. Then she tried the confusion angle, asking to revisit agreements we had already settled, hoping I would slip up or forget something. But I am a business owner. I do not forget details, especially when they involve money. After that came the dramatics. She claimed she had been wronged, abandoned, unsupported, and that the court would surely see her as the victim. The interesting part was she genuinely seemed to believe it, as if rewriting history in her head made it legally binding. My lawyer, however, was unmoved. He simply gathered timelines, receipts, documents, and created a simple picture that even a distracted judge could follow. The truth sat quietly on the page, while her story tried to outrun it. During our first mediation meeting, she arrived looking determined, maybe even confident. She started speaking about how she sacrificed her emotional comfort for the sake of my ambitions, how she felt lonely and unseen, and how she deserved compensation for the years she put into our home. I kept my expression neutral, knowing that reacting would only feed her performance. The mediator listened politely, then turned to the documentation my lawyer provided, and the shift in the room was almost physical, like watching a tide reverse mid-wave. Everything was clear. My business was protected legally, separated from marital assets. The house had been purchased with my premarital funds. The accounts were tracked and transparent. And suddenly her confidence cracked. She looked at me with this stunned expression, like she was seeing me for the first time, realizing I was not the distracted, overworked man she thought she could outmaneuver, but someone who had built his life with intention and therefore knew how to protect it. She whispered that I could not really leave her with nothing, and I responded quietly that I was not leaving her with nothing. She had her job, her savings, her independence. What she did not have anymore was access to the life she tried to take credit for and nearly destroyed. The mediator cleared his throat awkwardly. My lawyer tapped his pen lightly, and I sat there breathing steadily, feeling the weight of years of effort finally settle where it belonged, on my side of the ledger. Her side was empty because she had chosen it to be. The moment she stepped out of the marriage and into someone else's attention instead of into a conversation with me. Walking out of that meeting, I felt this sense of calm, strength, not triumph, not revenge, just balance, restored and clarity, earned, the kind you only get after losing something you thought was permanent and realizing you were the solid part all along. As the divorce moved forward, something unexpected happened, not in court, not in paperwork, but in me. I started to breathe again, really breathe the way you do when you finally step outside after being in a stuffy room for too long. I focused on my business, and it began to grow faster than ever, maybe because my energy was no longer being drained by argument size, or carefully avoiding emotional landmines, maybe, because clarity is rocket fuel. Either way, deals closed, opportunities opened, and every small win reminded me I was still the same man who built everything from determination, not luck. Meanwhile, my ex-wife began to shift her tone again. She stopped sending emotional messages and started sending practical ones, asking about the timeline, the assets, the final agreements. There was a hint of panic under every sentence, like she had expected a safety net, and finally realized it was never hers to begin with. One afternoon, we had a final mediation session, and she looked at me with this expression caught between disbelief and regret. She asked quietly if we could talk alone, and normally I avoid closed-door conversations with people who might try to rewrite history, but I agreed, because I wanted the closure, just not the kind she expected. When the mediator stepped out, she folded her hands in front of her and said she never meant to hurt me. She was just lost, confused, overwhelmed, the classic trilogy of self-justification. She said she thought I would fight harder for her, and that seeing me calm made her feel disposable. That part made me pause, not because I felt guilty, but because it showed exactly how differently we saw loyalty. To me, loyalty means you do not put someone in a position to choose between their dignity and your forgiveness. To her, loyalty apparently meant testing me until I broke. I told her gently that love does not survive tests that are designed for someone to fail. She looked down at her hands, and for a moment the room was quiet, the air heavy with all the things we never said. The mediator returned. We finalized the last details, and that was it. No dramatic goodbye, no symbolic moment, just a quiet signature and the echo of choices settling into place. As I walked to my car afterward, I felt no sadness, just a strange lightness, like shedding a coat I had forgotten was weighing me down. I sat in the driver's seat, hands on the wheel, and said to myself, this is not an ending. This is a promotion to a life where I respect my own effort, where my boundaries matter, where I do not have to apologize for ambition or stability or long nights building a future that someone else took for granted. The sun was setting, golden light stretching across the parking lot, and for the first time in a long time, I felt not just free, but steady, ready for whatever came next, not as a man who lost a marriage, but as a man who reclaimed his life. Weeks passed, and the silence in my home started to feel less like an empty space and more like a clean slate, a reset button I never knew I needed. The house felt different, lighter, the air clearer, no tension waiting behind doors, no quiet resentment hiding in corners. I rearranged furniture, fixed things I had put off for months, cooked meals that did not involve negotiating moods or apologizing for being tired. My routine became simple: wake up, work hard, come home, breathe, repeat. And somewhere inside that rhythm, I rediscovered myself, not the husband version, not the fixer, not the guy trying to keep everything together, but the man who once dreamed big and moved fast and trusted his instincts, the same instincts that were screaming now, telling me this was the right path. Every day, I grew quieter inside, not numb, but peaceful, like my mind finally had room to think without navigating emotional fog. My friends noticed. They said I looked younger, lighter, sharper. Mark, the same friend who sent me the picture, joked that I had leveled up like a video game character, and honestly, I felt that way. My ex, however, did not adjust as smoothly. She reached out a few times with vague questions about paperwork or logistical details. Then slowly the messages changed tone, becoming softer, more reflective, like she was remembering the version of me she never actually appreciated. She asked if I hated her, and I told her no, because hate requires energy, and I had decided to spend mine on better things. She asked if we could try to be friends someday, and I told her maybe in theory, but only after enough distance. That the past felt like a book we both read, not a wound. She said she missed the life we had, and that one made me pause, not because it hurt, but because it showed what she truly regretted. She did not miss me. She missed the stability, the comfort, the effort I poured into us. She missed the results, not the person creating them. I answered kindly, but honestly. I said, you did not lose the life we had, you walked out of it, and that life stayed with the person who built it. There was a long silence after that, and for the first time, I felt she finally understood, not the legal part, not the financial part, but the human part, the part where actions have weight and choices leave footprints. She replied with a simple, I am sorry, and for the first time it sounded real. But apologies do not undo reality, they just confirm that someone sees it now. I put down my phone, looked around my quiet living room, and felt this steady, powerful calm. I was not angry, not bitter, not triumphant, just grounded, free in a way that does not shout, but settles deep and steady inside your chest, the kind of freedom you earn by surviving something you never expected and coming out stronger than you thought possible. Life after the divorce settled into a rhythm that felt almost unreal at first, like stepping out of a storm and realizing the ground is finally still. I woke up earlier, without alarms, not out of anxiety, but out of clarity. My focus sharpened, my decisions got faster, and my business surged forward like it had just been waiting for me to stop carrying emotional luggage that was never mine to hold. I hired new staff, expanded operations, and even took a weekend trip with friends, the kind of simple trip I used to postpone because home felt unpredictable, and walking on eggshells takes more energy than a 12-hour shift. The funniest part was how many people told me I seemed different, calmer, stronger, more present. Turns out, when you stop pouring yourself into a cracked container, you finally have enough left to pour into your own life. Meanwhile, updates about my ex reached me indirectly, small things, mutual acquaintances mentioning she seemed lost or overwhelmed or struggling. And while a younger version of me might have rushed to fix things, this version stayed exactly where he was, not out of spite, but out of wisdom. You cannot rescue someone from consequences they chose for themselves. One afternoon, I ran into her by accident at a grocery store. She looked surprised, nervous, even, and I could see the calculations in her eyes, weighing old habits, old dynamics, old expectations. She asked how I was doing, and I answered honestly. I told her life was good, steady, calm. She nodded and said she was happy for me, but her voice had that tightness people get when they are trying not to show regret. She said she never expected things to end the way they did, and that she did not think I would walk away so completely. I told her quietly that walking away was not the hard part. The hard part was realizing how long I had been staying out of fear that things would get better without any evidence to support that hope. She looked down at her shopping cart and said she wished she had understood sooner. But here is the truth: understanding later is still later, and timing matters. She asked if I thought we could ever try again, and for a moment the grocery store felt too quiet, too still, like the world paused between us, waiting for the old version of me to speak. But he was gone, replaced by someone who no longer negotiates his worth. I told her gently that sometimes you lose something because you misjudged the value of what you had, and sometimes you lose something because it was never truly yours to begin with. She nodded slowly, eyes shining with a mix of realization and regret, but no tears, no theatrics, just a quiet acceptance. She said, "Take care," and walked away, and as I watched her leave, I felt no bitterness, no longing, not even relief, just a quiet, steady certainty that some chapters end exactly when they should. I pushed my cart forward, grabbed the next item on my list, and kept moving, because life does not pause for regret. It rewards those who keep walking with clarity and purpose, even when the past tries to tap them on the shoulder, reminding them of a version of themselves that no longer exists. The real turning point came weeks later, on a quiet Sunday morning, when I walked into my office and realized something simple but powerful. I was not rebuilding my life. I was finally living it, without fear, without tension, without someone waiting to drain whatever peace I created for us. I sat at my desk, looking at the plans for a new expansion, something I once thought was impossible, with the weight of constant emotional negotiation dragging behind me. And I felt this calm, powerful certainty that everything ahead was mine to shape, not out of revenge, not out of pride, but out of freedom, real freedom, the kind that feels like fresh air after years of holding your breath around someone who never noticed you were suffocating. I started reaching out to old friends, making new plans, taking care of my health, doing small things like buying better coffee beans or fixing the squeaky hinge on the back door, things that seemed tiny until you realized they were only tiny because your energy was always being poured into someone else's emotional black hole. One evening, Mark came over with takeout and a grin. He said, "Man, I'm proud of you." And I laughed, because for the first time I believed it myself. I was proud, too, not for surviving the marriage, but for surviving the version of myself who thought endurance was the same as love. Endurance is for marathons. Love is supposed to meet you halfway. Months passed, and the divorce became a distant shape in my rearview mirror. Not a wound, not a warning, just a lesson, a strong, clear reminder to never abandon myself in the process of trying to build a life with someone who refuses to build alongside me. One late afternoon, I stood in the warehouse, watching my employees joke around, music playing, forklifts humming, paperwork scattered in organized chaos, and I felt this deep, grounding sense of gratitude. I had built all this from grit, late nights, long days, and quiet determination, and I almost gave it away emotionally and legally to someone who treated my effort like background noise. I stepped outside the warehouse, the sky warm and wide, the kind that makes everything feel possible, and I said out loud, not to anyone, but to the air itself, "I made it through. I chose myself. I protected what I built, and I am not done yet." The truth is, endings are not the scary part. Staying in the wrong story is, and I finally walked out of the wrong story into the one where I am the narrator. Not the background worker, not the apologizer, not the fixer. Now, when people ask me how I am doing, I tell them the truth. I am good, I am steady, I am focused, and I am free. And that freedom is not loud or dramatic. It is quiet, strong, earned, the kind of freedom that comes from looking at everything you lost and realizing none of it compares to what you regained: your clarity, your peace, your future, your worth.